I'm Erica Lukes, host of UFO Classified. For me, life isn't simply black and white. Life is full of many unknowns. It is my goal to travel the world and to work with the world's leading experts in the hopes of making groundbreaking discoveries. Join me on UFO Classified Friday nights at 4 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, only on KCOR.
UFO Classified. UFO Classified. No more plausible deniability. Fact, fiction, or the truth. You decide. And now, the new voice of the high desert, the hostess of UFO Classified, Erica Lukes.
Happy Fantopia Friday. I'm Erica Lukes. Happy to be here on UFO Classified. I hope you all have had a safe and sound week this week. It's never a dull moment in my world, that's for sure. I'm always investigating and looking into things and making more and more connections. And it is, I'm amazed at what I learn. And I want to thank all the people from all over the world who have been listening to the show and supporting me and sending me messages and giving me information that is helping me with current research that I'm doing. It is great to have a community of people who are looking into things and want to make a difference. It really is wonderful. Tonight I'm joined by my two dear friends. I'm here with Gordon Lore, who is an author. He was with NICAP back in the 60s and is co-authoring a book with me right at the moment. I look to him for a lot of expertise and knowledge, and I've learned a great deal. I'm also here with Jan Aldrich, who is an archivist and researcher. He has Project 1947. It's amazing, and they both have been so wonderful for me, promoting my work and giving me information, giving me feedback and research that I can really sink my teeth into, because as we know, a lot of the subject seems to be, we're at a pivotal time and a lot of things are disappearing. A younger generation is coming into the picture, and that younger generation is being fed information by organizations like To the Stars or MUFON or different people that aren't necessarily giving them factual historical information, which is really critical to have a sound basis in that. And Jan and Gordon are both excellent in that regard. So thank you both for being here tonight. I'm always looking forward to talking to you. And I want to just start off by mentioning the passing of Ann Druffel, who really did a great deal of work in the community for decades. She researched UFOs for, over 40 years. And she really worked on abduction hysteria, documented evidence. She also worked on a research project about James McDonald, Dr. James McDonald, and she wrote a book called Firestorm that is an incredible book, and we're going to talk a little bit about that as we open. And so, Gordon, why don't you tell us, you knew Ann and you spent time with her. Just give us your thoughts about this wonderful woman.
Yes, thank you. Ann actually had been investigating UFOs for well over 60 years. She started back even before the days of NICAP, back in 1961, 65, when I was with NICAP as the vice president and assistant director and secretary treasurer there. And I first met Ann back in the 60s when she was a member of the NICAP Los Angeles subcommittee, and then became very friendly with her. But I particularly worked with her in the early 1990s when she was working on her book called Firestorm, Dr. James E. McDonald's Fight for UFO Scientists, which if I had a single UFO book that I think that I could only have on a desert island somewhere, I think it would be Firestorm. She did a terrific job, and she immortalized the life of who I think was not only a close personal friend, but also the number one scientist, the number one UFO scientist of all time. And, of course, McDonald had somewhat of a troubled life. He unfortunately committed suicide, but he did so much good work in the UFO field, and was a close friend of myself, and Dick Hall, who was the assistant director of NICAP for so many years, and of course Ann Druffel. And I remember Dick Hall and I spent many a night up to like 4 o'clock in the morning discussing UFOs with Dr. McDonald, and we were just devastated by his tragic loss back in 1971, I believe it was.
And so, Jan, I want to ask you, because you're so wonderful with history, but for those people in the audience that don't really understand the importance of what Dr. McDonald contributed, can you give them a rundown on the importance of his work?
Well, he was interested privately, without coming out too much, in the 50s. And he had his own sighting, which was sent to Hynek. Hynek had a copy of it from 54. He and other meteorologists were in the car when they saw it. But he more or less kept everything to himself until the 60s, and then he decided to come forward. And when he did, he almost spent full time on this. And when he contacted NICAP, he would send almost every day a letter to Dick Hall, Ted Blocher, and Isabel Davis on different topics, and he wanted them to go to the files and send him things that he could look for, and he called people up on the phone and personally interviewed people and went around the country speaking at various groups, including Headquarters Strategic Air Command, and he went to Washington and spoke to meteorological groups there, and he tried to drum up scientific interest in the subject. I remember Dick Hall.
Excuse me, Jan. I think he also didn't he also speak at the UN, the United Nations?
Yes, he did, but I mean, there's so many places that he spoke. It's hard to keep track of all of them. Of course, the UN was spectacular for the press, but it was not as it wasn't a very nothing much came of it. He went. But
it was the most prestigious place, of course.
Yeah, he went to China Lake, and the commander at China Lake, they sent a private aircraft to fetch him, so he could address the Navy people at the China Lake testing center.
There you go. Good. Yeah, he was an incredible individual and a close personal friend as well, and I miss him to this day, I'll tell you. And I think it was 1971 that he apparently took his own life, and we were just devastated.
Yeah, he had several crises in his life at that time.
He sure did.
One with his daughter and one with his wife. So it was. Plus, he had a professional crisis at the time. So.
And he was he was under a lot of scrutiny, and critics, skeptics were working very hard to discredit him and interfere with his professional reputation. Talk a little bit about that, because that's really what he endured in that regard was something.
Well, yeah, he had arguments with Phil Klass, who constantly tried to one-up him, and he had contracts with the Navy, and Class said, "Hey, he's using the Navy money to investigate UFOs, and this isn't right." And so that also was he had his funding cut. I don't think those things bothered him, but he was also under surveillance by the FBI because his family was, at the time, remember now, this is the Vietnam War, people were looking at people that, the FBI was looking at people that were protesting and things like that, and his family was fairly active in the anti-war movement. So, yeah, he was, as you say, he was under a lot of pressure.
And so, I mean, with what, because from what I am recalling, Phil Klass actually wrote letters to some of the people that he worked with in an attempt to smear his reputation. And I mean, to me, that's just, it's one thing to do it in the UFO arena, but to go about that by attacking somebody on a professional level like that seems really pretty shocking. But I guess that was par for the course for Phil Klass.
I think that was the way Phil Klass operated. It was personal with him. He took it personally. So then he decided that he would try to ruin McDonald by any means.
Exactly.
Yeah, can we get back to Ann Druffel here?
Yes, exactly. That's what I wanted to do. I think Ann, and go ahead and tell us your feelings and your thoughts about Ann, because you've watched her over the decades, and write different books and cover the topic. But what were some things that have really impressed you about her work?
Well, her first contact with UFOs was back in the Second World War, sometime between late June and early July. It was before the atom bomb, so she's able to remember back that far when she was much younger. And she was coming back from work, and it was 5 o'clock in the afternoon. At that time, of course, the sky is bright and everything. And Los Angeles was not the smog-infested city that it is now. So she saw in the sky a light, a bright light, like maybe as bright as Venus. And it moves around the sky, and she went and got her. When she was walking home from the bus stop, she went and got her mother, and they both watched it for a while. It stayed in the sky for well over an hour, and then it started doing weird things. It was she describes it as bright, unflickering, yellowish-white light in the northeastern sky, about 60 degrees in elevation. And then it seemed like it was falling apart. There were small pieces falling off it. And she thought, as she watched them, they're not going down to the ground. They're staying up with the object. They're moving away from the object. They're moving higher than the object. And they're about 2 or 3 more diameters away from the object, and they seem to be going away. And that, as she described it, they slowly disappeared. They were it seemed like they were reflecting light, because they would move, they get a little brighter, and so she watched this for a while, really fascinated, and she tried to go get her mother to see that. Her mother was in the middle of dinner, and she says, "No, I'm not coming out there." So that's an early what we might call satellite object case or mothership case. This so impressed her that when UFOs came on the scene, she became very interested in the whole subject. And later on in her life, she wanted to see if there was any more information locked away in her memory. So she did try hypnotism. Unfortunately, hypnotism is not it's not a truth serum, or it's not a way. So it was sort of inconclusive. But it just shows her. It just shows you how interested she was in this subject. Now, when she joined NICAP, they had an investigative group in Los Angeles called LANS, Los Angeles NICAP Subcommittee, which went around and investigated things. And Ida Bell Epperson was the chairman, and her daughter worked with her, Marilyn, and Ann here. And Ida Bell said, whatever they did, Major Keel would write them a letter and ask them to do more. They would say, it's almost not worth it to do a good job because he just asked you for more and more and more. He's relentless. So that was one thing. Later on, I saw an article by her about a pilot, a U.S. pilot in Korea, and he made what is called a service report, CIRVIS, Communications Instruction for Reporting Vital Intelligence. In other words, he made a UFO report that is flashed back to the United States. So years later, he told Ann about this. Now, we did know about service reports, and people had written the Air Force and the government, asking for them. A few of them came out, but the usual line was, "Well, we don't keep these things. We get a report, of something that needs some kind of attention like this. It might be an enemy aircraft, and one of the things was UFO. So they said, well, we don't keep these. We throw them away. So Ann decided to write the Air Force spokesman, Major Carl Hart at the time, and asked him, I have this pilot that saw something in Korea back in 1957. Could he get a copy of his report? Now, I don't know what happened with Major Hart if he didn't have instructions for this or anything. Excuse me. He happily told Ann, oh yes, we have large files on these of service reports. A number of agencies within the Air Force and outside the Air Force have to approve their declassification. But if you give me further information, I'll see what I can do. Well, he never did anything more, but he did make this admission that they do keep these reports. They're not thrown away. And years later, I called her up about something, and I did mention that, and she sent me a copy of a little letter she got from Major Hart. So it's very interesting to put with the JANEP 146 service report files, showing that these things are still somewhere in the Air Force files. It's hard to get anybody to. FOIA doesn't work with this really well. I'm not saying completely. There are some in the Project Blue Book files, and also in the some have come out by FOIA. But Ann's letter here was a revelation, and I'm glad she did that.
That's amazing. It sounds like I've always wanted to have the opportunity to talk with her, and I'm sad that I never did, because she could have been, I'm sure that she would have had some incredible stories and advice, being a woman myself in this field, a tough field to be a woman. But she did contribute quite a great deal. And Firestorm, like you were saying, Gordon, is one of those books that you really should have in your library. It is excellent and a very important life story of Dr. James McDonald that people need to know about because of all of his sacrifices, and both of you have sacrificed a great deal as well to not only investigate this but to preserve history, and for that we will always be grateful, because it's really, as I stated at the beginning of the show, it's critical that we have information and we get it out to the public.
Erica, can I read you just a short segment from Firestorm?
Yeah, we've got about 1 minute until break.
Okay. Here's what Ann Druffel says in her foreword to her own book. She says, "A world where people of the caliber of James McDonald is left to die alone and misunderstood is a world crying out for drastic reform of its intellectual institutions. The issue goes far beyond the question of knowing whether or not there are unidentified flying objects and where they may originate. What is at stake here is our own spirit and the uncertain future of human intelligence." That was from Jacques Vallée.
That was lovely. Thank you for reading that. I appreciate it. And I'm here. I want to thank all of my listeners for getting into chat. You guys are always wonderful, respectful. I love the people that support this show. I want to thank Jan and Gordon for being here. We're going to take a break, and we will be back after this.
Stand by. This is UFO Classified with Erica Lukes. The phone lines are open now at 702-425-9230. That's 702-425-9230. Worldwide callers use Skype name KCOR Radio. More UFO Classified with Erica Lukes on the KCOR Digital Radio Network. After this.
Now, broadcasting in digital HD radio.
In the shadows, a voice cries out. Evidence that you're not alone.
You said my name. What is your name?
Proof that the living and the dead coexist. Or do they? Every Wednesday night, 6 p.m. Pacific, 9 p.m. Eastern, join writer, producer, and paranormal investigator Greg Bakken on Ghost Box Radio as he explores, interviews, and investigates evidence alongside some of the best in the paranormal community and beyond.
6 people killed.
Ghost Box Radio, Wednesday nights exclusively on the KCOR Digital Radio Network, because the dead don't sleep. Ghost Box Radio.
We interrupt to bring you this.
Would you like to advertise on KCOR Digital Radio Network?
This is what I'm talking about.
At a fraction of the cost of traditional radio advertising, why not?
Tell them the good news.
Whether you need to promote your next book, product, or service, we can customize a package for just about any budget.
Finally, there is hope for the hopeless.
Why limit yourself to a tiny local market when KCOR can brand you to the world?
Here's all you do.
Visit KCORradio.com or contact our sales department by email at saleskcorradio.com.
We want it now!
See the difference with us by letting us work for you.
This ain't reality TV!
The KCOR Digital Radio Network.
Are you ready to go?
Turn the radio up.
It's showtime!
Here we go, world.
You're listening to the KCOR Digital Radio Network.
Broadcasting from the heart of Las Vegas, Nevada.
Their base is so large it has to draw most of its power from the nearby nuclear fusion plant.
The future of radio is here and now.
Monday nights are about to become hauntingly good, as Reverend Sean Whittington possesses the airwaves with Vegas Supernatural. Tune in every Monday at 5 p.m. Pacific, 8 p.m. Eastern for Vegas Supernatural, exclusively on the KCOR Digital Radio Network. There's a war raging between good and evil. The question is, which side are you fighting on? Tune in Monday nights as Reverend Sean Whittington sets the new standard for paranormal radio with some of the most influential personalities in the world today. Vegas Supernatural, hosted by Reverend Sean Whittington, every Monday night at 5 p.m. Pacific, 8 p.m. Eastern, exclusively on the KCOR Digital Radio Network. The one show even the devil doesn't want you to hear.
You're listening to UFO Classified with Erica Lukes, where the truth isn't hidden beneath the black lines of a Sharpie.
That's the craziest thing I've ever heard.
To be on with Erica, call 702-425-9230. That's 702-425-9230. Worldwide callers use Skype name KCOR Radio.
Radio contact.
Share your thoughts on the show on Twitter by using hashtag KCOR. Or head over to the live chats at KCORradio.com.
The audience goes nuts!
And now, your host of UFO Classified.
Are you ready?
Erica Lukes.
Welcome back to UFO Classified. I am always happy to be here, and I want to thank the people that contribute to keep the show on the air. That means the world to me, being a small business owner, and unfortunately a business that it's had to close its doors for some time. It has definitely been a struggle all the way around, so I appreciate show support. It means the world to me, and I have been trying to, with people that are supporting my show, send files to them, send different things that I have to express my thanks. And so anyway, thank all of you. And I want to thank Mario for being a good friend and a sounding board when I get kind of riled up about the subject in general. I have a handful of people in the subject that I mention all the time. Of course, two of the gentlemen are on my show this evening, but Gordon Lore, Jan Aldrich, Barry Greenwood is on the show quite frequently, but these three gentlemen have been so helpful to me in my career, my quest for knowledge, looking back at the history, putting pieces together. It has been a really fascinating, wonderful thing. And I love, I wish the three of us were sitting at Saga's Cafe right now. That would be fun.
Yes.
That was a great time. I'm so glad that I got to meet both of you. It was wonderful. It was so much fun just to sit back and listen to you and Tom Tulane, who I mentioned last week on the show, and to just hear just all of your wisdom. It's very cool. I love it. And it's a treat for my audience to have people like you who've been in the subject for so long on the show sharing your experiences. And we were talking about some women. We were talking about Ann Druffel and her contributions. And there are other women through the decades that have really made a great deal of contributions as well. And I think a lot of them go unnoticed. And, unfortunately, but we're going to talk about some of those wonderful women today. So welcome back to the show, gentlemen.
You're welcome. We're glad to be here.
Absolutely. And so, Jan, continue where you were.
Okay. Well, the other thing with Ann was she was putting together McDonald's files. She was helping McDonald's wife put together the files, and I called her up, and I think this was my first contact with her. I called her up and explained about Project 47 and how I'm looking for that. And she says, "Oh yeah, there's some 1947 things in the files that I've seen." And I said, "Well, there was an editor in Idaho when Arnold had his sighting in 1947." Don Johnson, and he was the aviation editor, and he pushed the sighting, probably got the first UFO investigations going at Wright Field, because he called General Twining direct. I mean, he was the aviation editor for the Idaho Statesman. He was also important in the Air Force, as that he had helped start the Idaho Air National Guard. So later on in his life, his wife said he had to quit UFOs, and McDonald said his wife sent me a bunch of his clippings and things, and told me that they said the Air Force said no more UFO articles. Now I wanted to see anything like that he had, so I said, "Do you know? Have you seen the thing about Don Johnson?" And she says, "No, I haven't. But what I'll do is I'll package up all the 47 material and send it to you." And I said, "No, don't do that. Just send me copies." I said, "Let's not take apart McDonald's files." So apparently, wherever McDonald got that. We haven't found it yet, because he had copious notes and things like that, and not everybody has gone through everything that he had. So I would still like to see that, though. It's very interesting, because Don Johnson was more than once right in the middle of the UFO controversy. The Murray Island thing, he was in that, and when the Air Force said in August and September of 1947 that the investigation was over, Johnson got involved again and wrote to the Air Defense commander, and it ended up on General Spatz's desk, who was the Air Force Chief of Staff, and he said, "No, we have not stopped the investigation. That was a press error." Of course, there's a press error that was carried around the world, but in any case, he was involved in the middle of it, so I was curious to see that. She did indicate how hard it was to put all his material together. He had scrawly handwriting. It was very difficult to read, and it was hard to see. A lot of the pages were out of order, so she had to get them back in order. She said, "It's ruining my eyes." So that's about the last interaction. Well, that was the first interaction, but that was about the only interactions besides letters that I had with her.
And so, can I just ask you: are McDonald's holdings at the University of Arizona?
Yes, they are. You have to make an appointment, but you can go and see them, and they'll make copies for you.
That is wonderful.
You have to tell them what you want. You can't just say, make me a copy of everything. But, I mean, you have to screen the records and tell them what you want to make copies of.
You'd have to have it. If you made copies of everything, they'd probably fit in 10 books the size of Firestorm.
Yeah, and the thing is, you got to pay for them, too.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
Absolutely. That's how it was. It isn't. When I was up at the University of Utah Special Archives and was going through Dr. Salisbury's files, that was the same thing. It's not a cheap process to get right. Files, especially files that are as extensive as Salisbury's and McDonald's, for sure.
Yes. And we had a 6-person team go down there and spend 2 weeks.
Wow.
At the University of Arizona, and I really don't think we made as much headway as we could have. And Barry came afterwards for another 2 weeks, so we haven't seen everything that's there. And you never know when things from McDonald's are important. And he got involved. It seemed like he didn't sleep at all. I mean, he seemed to be constantly in this subject. Like I said, he wrote a letter every day to Blocher, Hall, and Isabel. There weren't many days that he didn't write him a letter.
Yeah, I know. He put him out like mad. The same thing happened with Dick Hall and myself, particularly when after I took over as vice president of NICAP. And he would sit at our table at Dick Hall's home until 4 o'clock in the morning and just spit out this stuff at an incredible amount. His memory was just incredible. And also, I wanted to ask you, Jan, have you heard of, he told, McDonald told Dick and myself, and I remember he used to have little black notebooks that he would take out of his pocket and scribble little notes in. And he said that he had been hiding them away at a storehouse where he had a lot of his UFO information. And the last I heard from Ann Druffel was they never found those little notebooks. I wonder if you have any input on that, Jan, or if you are familiar with the little notebooks that he took out.
No. I know he made notes. He's
incredible, but the ones that he wanted to really keep secret, I guess, from prying eyes, was in these little black notebooks, and he had numerous ones. He would take out sometimes 6 or 7. He would fill one notebook, take out another one, just doing a 3-hour conversation we had around the table.
No, I've never seen those. I think they ought to be, if they're found, they ought to be interesting. Dr. Reed does. John Reed, he does the same thing. I mean, we're talking. I was talking with him, and he must have filled up 3 notebooks while we were talking.
I know. Also, McDonald was telling Dick Hall and I the last time we saw him back in 1971 that he was ready to really begin trying to get his own book published. And, of course, later that same year, he was found deceased. And as far as I know, the last time I talked with Ann was they never found any notes or any information on his book. Would you have any input on that, Jan?
No, I know nothing about that. Now, we have some of Ida Bell Epperson's correspondence with McDonald. And I thought, oh great, we got more McDonald letters. It'll be interesting, but it's mostly Ida Bell complaining about how hard Keo is making her work, which of course she was enjoying every minute of it. But they were newsy letters. They weren't UFO letters, really. Although she did have quite a bit about the Heflin case.
Well, it's a shame that McDonald couldn't get his book published. But, matter of fact, I remember him telling Dick and I that one time he was on an airplane and he had his black valise with some UFO reports inside them. And instead of putting them up on the hanger above his seat, he laid them down beside his seat and fell asleep. When he woke up, he picked up the suitcase, the briefcase, looked inside it, and nothing there, even though he had the briefcase locked. So somebody had transferred a a empty suitcase and took McDonald's, which was full of UFO information.
Yeah, he said he had a copy of the UFO evidence in there that he had made notes about the different cases.
Yeah. And he also said that he was followed around the streets of where did he live in Arizona? To where he lived in Arizona. My 84-year-old mind is not working well right now. And he was followed around by black limousines or cars with no license plates. And
he was under surveillance by the FBI. They were mainly after his wife, but he was under surveillance too.
Yeah, I know his wife had some affair or something going with the Black Panthers or something.
And then she attended anti-war demonstrations and things like that.
Yeah, she did. Yeah, I remember that. And I know McDonald was not exactly solicitous, but we could tell, Dick and I could tell, although he didn't admit it, that he was really upset by what she was doing.
Yeah.
And of course, she was committing adultery as well, as we know now.
Yeah, and his daughter was abused at Harvard, so, and the president of Harvard wouldn't do anything.
Oh, brother.
So, Ann talks about that in there. I said, maybe this was just a little too private. You didn't need to go into that.
Well, it's out there now. And,
yeah.
Well, that's ufology, isn't it?
It was long before the Me Too movement, let me tell you.
Oh, boy.
University presidents couldn't get away with that today.
Oh, it's never a dull moment, I'm telling you.
Yeah.
That's what I love about it.
In fact, I'm just looking at the picture on page 459 of Ann's book now, with me sitting with McDonald at a unidentified UFO panel around in 1969. That was when we went to do a TV show, and forget what it was. I was the assistant director of NICAP at the time. Yeah, I sure miss him. I sure miss Jim McDonald and Ann Druffel. I miss them both very much.
Absolutely. And so let's talk a little bit about more Ida Bell, because Ida Bell seems to be a very interesting person and nobody knows who she is. So can you give us a little bit of her background, Jan?
Well, she was in since 1947. In fact, she told me, she said, I have some wire recordings, which that's the way they used to record stuff, not on tape, but on wire. She says, I have some interesting wire recordings from 1947, radio programs on UFOs and interviews. Unfortunately, when Marilyn started sending us her Ida Bell's material, those things were not in there, unfortunately. So she was very active in the early days, and she started correspondence with people on the East Coast, Isabel Davis, Alexander Mabane, and Ted Blocher. So they were involved together. They were as thick as thieves, and she started writing to people in Australia and Sergeant Harold Fulton in New Zealand, who was an early UFO investigator. He was still in the New Zealand Air Force, but they let him investigate. And I kind of think they let him investigate UFOs because he would send all this stuff into the New Zealand Air Force that he investigated. So he was like their cat's paw. But anyways, he and Idabel had a really extensive correspondence back and forth, and he was the head of an organization in New Zealand called CSI New Zealand, civilian saucer, civilian saucer investigations. CSI New York, that's where Isabel was, Civilian Saucer Intelligence New York, and there was a one that was sort of before Idabel came out as sort of a point of contact. She may have been in CSI Los Angeles, which was another organization. They were all independent, but they had all this, the same moniker. But they, and so Idabel would be like the clearinghouse for things in the Pacific. People in Hawaii and New Zealand, Australia would write her or send her material, and later on, like I said, she joined NICAP, and she was the chairman of the Los Angeles NICAP subcommittee, which investigated a lot of cases. The Red Bluff is one of the most famous, and that's one of those things I told you about. You start looking at things, and you find things fall together, and pieces that you find elsewhere help you understand better what's going on. Red Bluffs was a highway patrol, and these two highway patrol officers saw a UFO, and there was a little interference involved, but it was a rather spectacular case, and they were very careful in their observations. So Idabel was able to put together a really extensive report on that. And in the report it says, oh, and there's some more cases out to the west here in one of these small towns. So Barry and I are scanning through the Ufos files, and here is an article about the two guys that saw something similar the same time as the Red Bluff at another town completely. And it is mentioned in Red Bluff that there were other officers around the area that saw UFOs. This is a completely different incident, but it's the same time. And it was just amazing that we found the article, and it just goes, okay, there's something else for this report. Just tuck it in there. So that's, as I said, that kind of made it go. Now, I talked to her several times, Idabel. And we mostly talked about Harold Fulton because I had a long correspondence with Sergeant Harold Fulton. So that's how we were connected, more or less. Fulton was probably one of the best investigators in New Zealand ever. Mm-hmm. He kind of had to stay away from Air Force cases, but the Air Force, he did talk to like family members. If they had a sighting, that was okay. But he was active duty Air Force. Eventually, he got rotated to Singapore, and that was the end of his career in the Air Force as far as UFOs go. When he came back, he had retired, but he continued investigating cases until he died, and then his wife had the she decided that somebody who was interested in UFOs should get it, and it passed to my friend Murray Bott, who said, yeah, he went down to his Fulton's wife called him up, went down there to pick him up, and he said you could hardly breathe in the car. There was so much stuff in there.
Wow.
He hauled it away.
That is amazing. And I there's so much more to talk about with regard to this. And I've also have a couple questions that have been asked in chat, and I want to get to those when we get back from break. But we are headed there right now. I'm Erica Lukes here with my friends and colleagues, Jan Aldrich and Gordon Lore. We are taking the longer of the two breaks, so go grab a margarita, and we will catch you on the other side of the break.
Listen very carefully.
This is Houston. Say again, please. Houston, we've had a problem.
This is UFO Classified, live every Friday night, 4 p.m. Pacific, 7 p.m. Eastern, exclusively on the KCOR Digital Radio Network. The truth is out there, just waiting to be discovered.
And now, if you will, accompany me on a journey to the future.
For more information on the host of UFO Classified, Erica Lukes, upcoming guests, as well as links to the past shows,
visit her website at ufoclassified.com.
UFO Classified.
UFO Classified.
This is KCOR Las Vegas, home of the Digital Radio Network, broadcasting from a shack just south of Area 51.
Wait, that doesn't exist.
This is the KCOR Digital Radio Network. Now for the news.
This landed at a ranch at Corona, New Mexico, and the rancher turned it over to the Air Force. Rancher W.W. Brizell was the man who discovered the saucer.
What I thought was a star began coming in my direction at a very rapid rate of speed.
The unidentified object, which some sources thought might be a blimp, moved slowly down the Pacific coast from Santa Monica and disappeared south of Long Beach.
I saw a UFO, and it went down the river, turned right at the United Nations, turned left, and then down the river.
UFO Classified.
UFO Classified.
No more plausible deniability. Fact, fiction, or the truth. You decide. And now, the new voice of the high desert, the hostess of UFO Classified, Erica Lukes.
Welcome back to the second half of UFO Classified. I want to just thank Doug for contributing to the show. Thank you very much. That means the world to me, as you know, and I hope that you are feeling good and staying healthy, my friend. I want to also give a shout out, as I always do, to Mario for his support and everything that he has done and getting the show on YouTube. And if you guys are ever bored, make sure you go to the YouTube UFO Classified page and definitely get in there and make some comments and things. I always appreciate that when I look in there and see great comments. I'm here tonight with my two friends, Jan Aldrich and Gordon Lore, and we were talking at the beginning of the show about Ann Druffel. She passed away earlier this week, and she will be missed. And we've been talking about different women in the field of ufology over the decades. And I just want to ask, we had a question from chat, and I wanted to ask either of you about this, about Howard Hughes and his sightings. Have you ever heard anything about that?
You mean the famous aviator, you mean?
Yes.
No, I'm not familiar with those. I've heard he had some sightings, but I'm not familiar with them at all. Maybe Jan is.
I am not familiar with them. I heard the same thing. George Early told me once he had written to Howard Hughes about getting support for NICAP, and of course.
Well, I see that.
He never got an answer or anything. But he always held out hope that Howard would put some money in there.
I see on page 34 of Ann's book that she mentions Howard Hughes, and I'm looking at it now. I'm trying to find where that is. So maybe there's some reference to that in here. But on page 34, I don't even see the name Howard Hughes. But I'm still looking. So go ahead.
Yeah, no, that is interesting. And so let's get back to the women that you knew that you worked with that impressed you the most. And Jan, who else can you think of that you worked with that really impressed you?
Well. I told you about Diana Sinclair-Knopp. She was 6'4" blonde, and we used to call her, not to her face, but all the guys in NICAP called her the blonde Venusian. Now, if you've ever read Adamski's case, he's taken aboard a Venusian spaceship.
Of course he is.
And all the women are voluptuous and very tall. So that's how Diana got her nickname. But she was, when I would go to NICAP, she would be there. I remember one day I was walking in there, and I had a Spanish, and I knew it was an interview. From what little French I could read, I knew it was an interview with this airline pilot in Lima, who flew out of Lima. And he'd seen a UFO, and this case is in Blue Book. We didn't know it at the time. But it was obviously an interview by a Spanish newspaper. And she said, well, when we were talking, and she keeps looking over. I got it at my side. She keeps looking over and says, what is that? And I said, it's a Spanish interview, and I think it's with this pilot from Lima. It's an American pilot flying with Fawcett Airways. And she said, well, give it here. So I gave it there. And went about my business. About 15 minutes later, she brought in a translation. So that was one of the things she did. She translated a lot of Spanish material. And once again, by scanning through all this stuff that NICAP had, you see her translations. You see that, it wasn't just one or two things she translated. She translated a lot of stuff. Some of it was quite extensive. So she had this long report from Uruguay, maybe 24 sightings, and she had translated each one of those. So she put a lot of work into that. And what was, she worked with Blocher and Isabel Davis, and they would investigate cases. A lot of times she would send out a letter to the witnesses, with a form and ask them to fill it out, and sometimes it would come back, and a lot of times it wouldn't, unfortunately. And I got a whole file, about 3-inch file thing of stuff that never came back, unfortunately, with her signature on it. But she would also call up the NASA and the Navy and the Air Force for things that were happening locally around Washington, to see if they had any traffic up or anything that could explain the UFOs. And the Weather Bureau. Yeah, she called the Weather Bureau too. And some of the stations around Washington, D.C. So after Gordon left here, and of course she was not working there in 69 or so. But after Gordon left, she was rehired by Nixon and that's what she was doing again. In the 70s, she was writing to witnesses just like she did before. So
I'd heard that.
Yeah, so that was interesting. That was interesting. So Gordon knew her better than I did.
Yeah, I knew her as a friend, although I might reconsider that since she worked for Nixon. Just kidding. She was. Shame on you, Diane.
So what's even interesting now, going through the correspondence, 1972. Now this is the Nixon era of NICAP. There's a letter in there signed Isabel Davis.
Yep. So, yeah. You continue
working. Now she apparently went back to work for Nixon also. And
yep.
When I saw him after coming back from Korea, and there was nobody in the office, he said his girlfriend came in every once in a while and helped him out, but he was there by himself. And I said, well, you ought to rehire Isabel. And I said, she could really help you out here. And he says, oh, yeah, she could do some public relations material for me and things like that. Well, at the time, I wanted to strangle him, but I kept my cool. I wanted to jump across his desk and strangle him. But I told him, I says, Stuart, Isabel Davis is about the smartest person in ufology, and she knows more than almost anybody else, and she's a thorough checker. What you need to do is to rehire to help you investigate the cases. And I didn't say this to his face, but I wanted to, because you can't do a job that's worth a tinker's damn. But I never thought that he was going to do it. He just blah, 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 well, I'll think about it. But apparently he did. So, because I found this letter in this case file, which she had investigated, and it was her signature on it. So,
how interesting!
And that's something I never knew about. I never knew that she went back afterwards.
Yeah.
I knew Diana went back, and I knew her cousin Kathy went back. Because I saw them up at Rhode Island Avenue, but I didn't know about Isabel going back there. So it's like history. You're learning something new all the time.
That's right. Yeah.
Isn't that fascinating?
I can say something about Jan, Erica. He can say more about UFOs at the speed of a bullet than I ever knew myself. I mean, he's got a remarkable memory about all kinds of information and minutia about the UFO subject.
Right, and it is interesting to say, like, it's been fun for me to listen to your conversations and to sit back and learn some of these things, because there's so many little subtle nuances to this subject and different people that entered at specific points in time and left, and some of the connections to intelligence agencies or connections to religious or political. There's so many. The whole subject is fascinating, not only because you're looking for another life form, potentially extraterrestrial life. We've got that, but then you've got all of the people involved. And, the one thing that I love is learning, like all of us are clearly obsessed about this, but we are, because we've had our own personal experiences. There was some defining moment in our lives that led us here tonight. And I think that in and of itself is just an amazing process to discover with other people.
Yes, indeed. Yeah, I remember you telling me you had a sighting over Skinwalker Ranch one time, even. So
I did. Yes, I did. I had a very, very odd things happened when I was there. Right after my visit with Junior Hicks, but that is definitely, a story for another day. But I've got somebody in chat who is asking about Cora Lorenzen.
Oh, Okay.
Okay, we cannot forget Cora Lorenzen, because she was in. Right. She was in from the very beginning, and she had a UFO sighting in 1947 before Arnold.
Yeah, even before NICAP, she had her own organization, APRO. Yeah. Did they ever find? Because last I heard, all the APRO files were lost.
Well, they're kind of lost, or there's somebody that's hoarding them. Let's put it that way.
Okay, all right.
And there are people that have made offers for them, so occasionally the people that have the files, if somebody writes to them, if like Philip Mantle was doing a book on Pascaluska, so they sent him the file, but that's very rare. So we think that some ufologists have access to this, but basically the files are gone. And she, like I said, she had files starting from 1952 when she had the organization. It wasn't on, as she used to say, it didn't run on as grand a scale as NICAP, but she had a lot of contacts in South America.
Right. But by the way, Jed, do you have it? Go ahead.
Yeah. Go. No. I'm finished. Go ahead.
All right. Yeah. No, I was going to ask you. Would you have any input whatsoever about the relationship that Keogh had with Admiral Hillenkoetter, and why actually Hillenkoetter resigned from the NICAP board? I think he was the chairman of the board at one time, long before I even came on board in 19.
Well, yeah, for a long time they had no chairman, but he was there. He was a classmate of Keogh's in.
I know, he was Keogh's best friend. They even graduated from the Naval Academy in 1920 together.
Yeah, they were together in the class there, and he told Keogh, he said, CIA was monitoring these things since 1947.
Okay,
they won't admit that stuff, but he told Keogh that's what's happening. The unfortunate thing about Keogh is that he had an eidetic memory. He didn't need to write anything down.
No. Matter of fact, I'll tell you a little story. Dick Hall and I didn't believe him. So when he was up in the office one time, out a book, not a UFO book, but a book from the library there, opened it, and Keogh, in 10 seconds or less, went through 3 pages of the first chapter, and he recited after 30 minutes of not looking at the book. He recited word for word every single word correct of those 3 pages. That's what kind of photographic memory he had.
Yeah, but that was, you know what the problem with that is? He didn't write things down, and he didn't keep things. That's the problem. He kept it up in his head. So what he did is when he got UFO reports, when he was on his own as a lone wolf, he got UFO reports. He remembered them in his head, but he sent the UFO reports to True Magazine editors. And, of course, what did they do? And in 1956, they lost the files, their UFO files. So there's very little stuff that Keogh had. There was a letter in there. Yeah.
Although I heard from Dick Hall and a couple of others as well that Keogh did have a short stack of actual paper material that he kept.
Yeah, he did. He did keep some stuff. One of them was a letter from a guy named Brewster who worked at the Republic Aviation.
Right. But also, Dick was telling me that a lot of that stuff he had hidden away somewhere, and they were never found. Whether they were in a bank
the confidential files, the people that sent him Him and Admiral Fernie, because Admiral Fernie was so famous that a lot of his people that had worked on the missile development with Fernie had seen UFOs, and they gave Fernie their cases, on a confidential basis, and those confidential files are lost.
Yep.
Yeah, a few people have come forward, like Commander Davis. He got a radar return in Korea, and he was in the Navy, and he was off a carrier. He was a carrier-based guy, and he got a UFO thing, and the radars in the fleet confirmed his radar sighting, and his was one of those confidential cases. And later on, he let his name be used. So that one is known, and there was something called the Navy Squadron case, 1953. A whole squadron of Navy pilots off the Atlantic coast saw a huge UFO. But those people were still around in the 70s. So two of them came forward, and they were in that squadron. So
yeah,
we were able to recover that one. There's one more, Cape Canaveral. 1961. Now this is one of Keogh's famous confidential cases. January 61, they were tracking a Navy missile. I want to say it was Poseidon. Anyways, they'd shot it off, and the first stage comes back down, and they had a tracker track the first stage as it's falling back to Earth. And this UFO was in the area, and all of a sudden it switched over to the UFO.
Uh-huh.
And so that was one of Keogh's confidential cases. Well, when we were going through the NICAP files doing our scanning, there it was. I'm saying it's an actual report from the old Pan American Airways that they ran some of the radars on the range, and it's an unclassified report. And there's the report, and it's got the graph and everything where it switched to the UFO and everything. And I said, "This is amazing." And it was unclassified. Of course, Keogh wouldn't take anything that was classified. So that was just amazing find in there, and there's so many things like that in the NICAP files. But the confidential reports were really good, and Keogh wrote about them in Flying Saucers Top Secret, but most of them have apparently been lost.
Yeah.
Nobody knows what happened to them.
Really
but like I said, he had so much stuff where he kept it in his head that he didn't have the papers. Now, he did keep an interview he did with Major Dewey Fournay when Fournay left the Air Force. About 2 days after he left the Air Force, he did so Keogh had a copy of that interview. He wrote everything down. It's obvious it was for the true editors, and he sent the top copy in, but he had a carbon copy, so he sent that. He kept that, and he did have a few things, like a letter from Brewster. Brewster's a very interesting character. He worked for Republic Airways, or not, Republic Aviation, and they were a contractor to the Air Force. And they sat in on a lot of UFO meetings at the Pentagon. And this is a letter in April, before the Life magazine article in 1952. A letter from Brewster to Keogh. And Brewster saying, you know, I've been over to the CIA a couple of times now, and I'm trying to get them interested in doing some more work on these UFOs. I'm saying, this is amazing. You know, and he's talking about some of the stuff he picked up around the Pentagon. And he's only got one letter. All the other letters Keogh must have given away to True magazine. And Blocher one day, Blocher told me, he says, hey, Major Keogh, you need to bring in all your correspondence.
And I've got to cut you off right there. Of course, right at the punchline, right at the best part, but we've got to go to break. But we'll talk a little bit about that. We'll continue your thought with Keogh and his comments after we get back from the break. I'm Erica Lukes, and I'm here with two extraordinary men, Jan Aldrich from Project 1947. He's done amazing work. Gordon Lore, who has written many, many books and is co-authoring a book with me as well. We will be back after the break.
This is UFO Classified with Erica Lukes.
Erica Lukes.
The phone lines are open now at 702-425-9230. That's 702-425-9230. Worldwide callers use Skype name KCOR Radio. More UFO Classified.
UFO Classified
with Erica Lukes on the KCOR Digital Radio Network. After this.
Vegas, baby! Vegas' #1 source for talk and new music.
How cool is that?
1 million miles till midnight. A story of timelines, artificial worlds, simulated races, and the galactic imprint. And the destiny of a blue world called Earth. 1 million miles till midnight, written by Solaris Blue Raven, is a journey through the mind's eye which allows the reader to surf a wave of technological and multidimensional intellect, revealing a bridge between conscious design and the truth. A multidimensional bleed-through awakens the world of artificial intelligence to set sail into the frontiers of a vast multiverse, morphing planets and terraforming ascended worlds beyond the linear programs of a fated race. 1 million miles till midnight will awaken, inspire, prepare, and enlighten one to the many multidimensional states of consciousness and worlds we reside in. With every cell and atom, we are this truth and multiverse. 1 million miles till midnight. Written by Solaris Blue Raven. Available now at Amazon.com. Don't wait. Get your copy today.
There is a world outside that which we live in, a realm where fact and fiction collide. The Paradigm Matrix.
The Paradigm Matrix.
Hosted by Willie Miranda, every Friday night at 6 p.m. Pacific, 9 p.m. Eastern.
The Matrix is everywhere. It is all around us, even now in this very moment.
The 1 hour show that will surely leave you hanging on the edge of the rabbit hole.
The Paradigm Matrix
explores a universe of topics from UFOs, cryptozoology, conspiracies, as well as all things paranormal.
Enter a world of the twisted and deformed.
Friday night, 6 p.m. Pacific, 9 p.m. Eastern. The Paradigm Matrix, exclusively on the KCOR Digital Radio Network, where fact and fiction collide.
Alien Deceptions, a suspenseful sci-fi romance thriller by Tina Marie, featuring the tantalizing Erica Jones and the mysterious Russell Hamilton. An out-of-this-world book of fiction based on years of document facts and files the government does not want you to know about, at least not yet. Alien Deceptions by Tina Marie. Available now at Amazon.com or get a signed copy at TinaMarieEntertainment.com. Get your copy now.
1, 2, 3, 4!
To the KCOR Digital Radio Network.
I love the way it sounds.
Love the music. Oh, I listen to.
The future of radio is here and now.
You're listening to
UFO Classified with Erica Lukes, where the truth isn't hidden beneath the black lines of a Sharpie.
That's the craziest thing I've ever heard.
To be on with Erica, call 702-425-9230. That's 702-425-9230. Worldwide callers use Skype name KCOR Radio.
Radio contact.
Share your thoughts on the show on Twitter by using hashtag KCOR. Or head over to the live chats at KCORradio.com.
The audience goes nuts.
And now, your host of UFO Classified.
Are you ready?
Erica Lukes.
Erica Lukes.
Welcome back to the show. Sorry about that. Having a couple of things take place here that I had to deal with, which is just never a dull moment. But when we were leaving for break, you were talking about Brewster and the Pentagon and things, and I want you to finish up about that. But then I also want to ask a question that we have that Cosmonaut asked in the chat room. So Jan, go ahead.
Yeah. Okay. So Brewster, he sat in on the September 1951 Fort Monmouth investigation and meetings about it at the Pentagon. So, and he also accompanied the investigators out there, and he's really a secret informant for Keogh. So that's kind of interesting.
What was his name again?
Brewster. I think it's John Brewster. Yeah.
Yeah, it sounds familiar, but I don't recall it.
Yeah.
Specifically.
It seemed like they had a cozy relationship. The Air Force Intelligence had a cozy relationship with Republic Aviation.
Ah, okay. Huh.
And so let me just ask really quickly, because I want to talk about this for Cosmonaut. He asked this question. If either of you ever found a witness to Admiral Byrd's alleged UFO battle in Antarctica, or what are your thoughts about that legendary, we've heard about this for decades. So what are your thoughts about that?
I don't really know anything about it, although I did hear what may be a rumor that he had either seen a UFO or found an underground place in the Arctic where a UFO colony had been living or temporarily living there. But I think those were rumors and probably false ones at that. That's the only thing I've heard. But I did hear that there was like an hollow earth theory that Admiral Byrd may have gotten into, where there may have been some extraterrestrials. But I think I think there's been a lot of mythology about that, and I have to wonder if that wasn't kind of inserted into the narrative along with all the Nazi UFO stuff. And so, Jan, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think it's another glorification of the Nazis. They did go down to Antarctica before the Second World War. They did have an expedition down there. It wasn't that expensive. As far as Admiral Byrd, he did take an expedition to Antarctica right after the war was over. It was kind of to keep people occupied while they're waiting for their discharge, I think, more or less. As far as I could see, and anything that I've looked at, and I have looked at some of this stuff about Admiral. I am interested in Antarctica, so I have looked at some of this stuff about Admiral Byrd. And no, there's nothing like that. I mean, it's made up out of whole cloth. I don't think there was any battle down there with either aliens or Nazis that got alien information, or Nazis that had super spaceships or something that they made. And I kind of suspect this is another glorification of the Nazis, which is big in ufology.
Right, and I want to ask you about that because I think, I've just been coming across a lot of different things lately, and to me this is very alarming, and I don't think a lot of people pay attention to this. And I want to just kind of preface this by saying I was at speaking at a conference, and it was very interesting to me because I was watching one of the speakers there, and he was doing a slideshow. It was very supposed to be all about love and light and empowerment and stuff. And it was very interesting because on all of his slides that he presented, they were all black and white, including a full image of Hitler with one of his quotes. And then in another slide, it was black and white except for the Nazi flag, which was in color. And when I sat back there and I kind of looked at that, and a couple of the other people sitting with me, a couple other speakers were looking at that like, holy crap, what kind of subliminal messaging is this that we're seeing? And there is a very big, there is an undercurrent of this type of thing in ufology. Jan, where did that get started that you know of?
Oh, very early. Almost after the war was over, there was supposed to be a secret base or secret experiments going on in Spain, and this was in the regular news. And the Americans were trying to supposedly press the Spaniards to cough up these guys that had gone to Spain, and they were supposedly working on rockets and stuff. It turned out to be. There was nothing behind the story. It's very early. It was in Brazil. There's a lot of things in Brazil like that, and still today, it's kind of a popular theme down there that Nazi glorification. They were not very good physicists. Their atomic bomb, even though it was done by Schrodinger, who was one of the top theoretical physicists in the world, Schrodinger's cat, that one. He got the ratios wrong, and his atomic bomb would have never exploded. In fact, somebody was Schrodinger went to a conference in Switzerland, and American OSI agent was sent to assassinate him, and the guy was a catcher, as a matter of fact, for I think the New York Yankees, but he was also a CIA spy during not a CIA, OSI spy during the, and he went to this conference where Schrodinger spoke, and he knew enough about the physics involved that he said, there's no sense of wasting this guy's mind. He's a brilliant person, but he doesn't have the, it's not, he doesn't, we don't need to assassinate him. He's not even close. They're not even on the verge of an atomic bomb. And of course the Germans had run all the physicists off. That's why Einstein was over here, and half the other people that worked in physics. The Nazis called physics a Jewish science. So it's really upsetting that people somehow think that the Nazis are somehow involved in a secret project, and some of it's so ridiculous you cannot believe that people are actually repeating it.
That's fascinated me too, and I think Jan, talk a little bit about some of the things, because this is really critical for people to understand ways that think that that people, certain factions maybe, are glorifying all of this in the community or in the subject.
Well, one of the things I read, and by this woman who is she's been at this all her life. And she wrote this thing about the Nazis and how in the SS, there was really a peaceful group in the SS that was trying to stop the war, and they were working on these super aircraft, and they didn't want to use them as in the war, but they were peaceful SS. There's nothing peaceful about the SS. Those are the guys that ran the extermination camps, and a lot of other nasty things. And I'm sorry, that seems to me like I said, more glorification of the Nazis, hoping that people don't really know what they were up to and what they did during the war, and how inhumane and the atrocities that they, and it seems to be wiped clean, with all these people that think there's something going on.
Yeah.
The intelligence people over there in Europe afterwards, they had a thing called Project Ringer, and they would bring in, also in Japan, they would bring in people from the Army and the Air Force and the intelligence services that the Nazis had, and question them. And they had what they called intelligence swindlers. They would make up a good story like this and tell it to the intelligence guys, and they would get fed and housing and gasoline, which was at a premium then, so if they had a motorbike, they could ride around and stuff like that. Right after the war, everything was pretty bad in Germany. And sooner or later, Americans would catch on and say, okay, that's it, that's enough from you. But they did have what they called them, just intelligence swindlers. They tell you a good story, and the deeper and more ridiculous it got, that's when it was identified as being trash. Yeah. Now there were some things that they got out of people still in Germany. We did get a lot of the rocket scientists over here in the United States, but there were still, there's still a lot of scientists in Germany that had interesting information. So one of the things Project Ringer was doing is to get that information.
Yeah.
And so, indeed. I mean, why would they bring? Is this just propaganda for them to start using the UFO cover story?
Yeah, it is to a certain extent. There's people that admire the Nazis. I mean,
Yeah, I know.
Look! You see some of these demonstrations, and there's people carrying Nazi flags. And they're not doing it so much anymore because people have been, letting them have it. But when they had the alt-right demonstration down there were people carrying Nazi flags, wearing Nazi paraphernalia and stuff like that.
Oh, I know.
It is interesting, and I think the thing that has been fascinating to me and concerning to me over the years is to look and see how much of this has been inserted into the UFO community. And I think people definitely need to be aware of that. It is incredibly concerning, as I said. And I wanted to ask you, Jan, about Ernst Zunel.
Huh?
There was an anti-Semite, believe he was in Canada, and Ernst Zundel. Is that his name?
Yeah, it doesn't ring a bell with me. I'm sorry.
Okay. But he was promoting a lot of the Nazi UFO things, and so it's always interesting to see who, over the years, like how some of these things have taken hold. And like I said, when I was in that, when I was speaking at that conference, to see the kind of imagery that I saw just was pretty staggering for me. So I think, like I said, we just need to be careful in any of this. It's we're looking at facts, we're looking at good cases, and we're not getting involved in myths or narratives that aren't necessary, that have a political agenda, is what I'm trying to say. Because there are things of merit.
There's a movie called Valkyrie.
Yeah.
Yes, Tom
and
Cruise.
it's about German officers that tried to take over from Hitler at the very end of the war. Of course, they all were shot, but there were thousands of people. There were thousands of Germans, even Nazi party members that were secretly against Hitler, and about 3,000 of them were guillotined. That's what they used to do. If they thought you were a traitor, they would guillotine you. So that was a special punishment for traitors, and there's about 3,000 of these. These are just loyal German citizens that hated Hitler. And some of them were in the party because they had no choice.
Even General Erwin Rommel was in on the assassination to a plot to kill Hitler on July 20th, 1945, 40, and 44 actually. And matter of fact, the Valkyrie movie is the excellent a movie about that attempt. It's too bad they didn't succeed, because Hitler is now responsible for the extermination of as many as 50 million people in those concentration camps and whatnot. Extermination camps were just a black mark on all of history.
Absolutely.
But also, they really expounded the UFO theme too. Back in the days, I remember seeing these even in the old movie theaters, like space rockets that looked like they were shooting out beams of fire from both the front and the end, with these Nazi signals on them. So, and I know there have been some so-called Foo Fighters reports from Nazi Germany as well as Japan during World War II in the 44, 45 era.
Well, it's interesting, and I also want to bring up too the occult. There's this mysticism in the occult that seems to be kind of alluring to people that are going down that kind of rabbit hole, and I find that fascinating as well.
Yeah, the Nazis were interested in the occult. Hitler was interested in the occult, so.
Very much.
Yeah, so it's obvious that's another way for them to get in here. General Putt and General McDonald McDonald wrote to Putt, and he said he asked about how far the Germans were ahead, and Putt wrote back to McDonald. He said, on paper, their designs were 10 years ahead of us. And he said, we're lucky they didn't have the industrial power to put these into effect, or we would have been in trouble. He said it was bad enough with the V2s. So they weren't 50 or 100 years ahead. They were about 10 years ahead. And that's from one of the guys that went all over Europe to collect plans and devices and things like that. General Putt is not he's a real important character in the Second World War and afterwards.
Yeah, if I can add something here, I spent a whole evening with Verner Von Braun, and he was the man responsible for the V-1, V-2 rockets out of Germany at the time. He was in Washington, D.C. for a premiere of his movie, I Aim at the Stars, with Kurt Jürgens as Von Braun, and he invited me to a special gathering. Actually, Mamie Eisenhower, the First Lady of the United States at the time, was there, plus many others. And it was a very exciting evening.
How interesting. And so we've got just 3 minutes until the show closes, and you've talked about some very fascinating women that I would like to definitely learn more about. And I know that somebody in chat was mentioning Carla Turner. And Carla Turner was a very interesting researcher as well, who died at a very young age and things. And so I was just throwing it out there in chat that I should have my friend Greg Bishop on the show because he knew Carla Turner and could lend some insight. But there are a lot of wonderful women that have, Phyllis Bettinger, people like that have worked really tirelessly behind the scenes that have not received a lot of recognition. And it's important to remember their work and also to definitely carry on the work of Ann Druffel, who made such a brilliant contribution with Firestorm. We need to definitely get that book. So I would recommend it. And I appreciate both of you for coming on. You have so much knowledge, and you've met these people firsthand and had personal interactions with them. And I think that is a really, really cool thing. And I hope that none of these people get lost in history or get lost in kind of the current push that we're seeing in ufology, where social media and people with the most money seem to be dominating the thought process of everything. And I've got to ask you really quick before we go to break or before we end the show tonight, Jan, what did you make of the latest bout about the Wilson documents?
Well, all I could say is ufology is constantly being fooled by insider information that turns out to be bogus, without any doubt. And this is just another example. It's like Barry says, we need to actually work on ufology, not work on shortcuts like secret knowledge and things like that.
Right.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I think that's great. And I think it is funny to see some of these new people who show up in the field and, they've got a certain insider talking to them and they've got this secret scoop. It's kind of like the Bill Moore thing all over. And they think that they're, some sort of, messiah or I don't know, whatever, but they're not doing their due diligence as quote unquote journalists or different things. And we see a lot of stuff like the Wilson documents get put forward and you just think, oh my Lord. But anyway, I just wanted you to weigh in on that because I think it's been making the rounds and it's completely ridiculous. And I think it's like, again, it's just another distraction to look away from where we really should be looking. And it isn't anything in that general area. How do you feel about that, Jan?
Yeah, I agree. It's unfortunate. Barry says one of the reasons we're doing all this scanning is to get the biggest database we can. And that might answer certain things. But everybody's already got a theory about how everything works, so we're wasting our time because everybody already knows what's happening.
Absolutely. And I really appreciate all the hard work that all of you do. And I have got links to Gordon's website on my website, ufoclassified.com, and also to Jan's website where you can go and really read up on the history of the subject. So definitely go to UFO Classified and learn more about Jan and Gordon, my two dear friends. As I've said, they've mentored me and been very helpful in my career, and I will always appreciate that and want to carry their work forward because it is important for all of us. So, Jan, what are you working on right now? I know we've got like 1 minute until the show close, but what's your current project?
Well, Barry's working on, he's getting into the National Archives of Brazil, so he is has about 5,000 newspaper references that he's trying to chase down.
Oh, that is awesome. I can hear that music, and I'm sorry that means we've got to go, but that is cool. I will get both of you guys back on very soon. Stick around for a great night on KCOR. Willie Miranda is up next with Rob Goutreau. So have a wonderful evening. Be safe, and I will catch you all next week.
Listen very carefully.
This is Houston. Say again, please. Houston, we've had a problem.
This is UFO Classified, live every Friday night, 4 p.m. Pacific, 7 p.m. Eastern, exclusively on the KCOR Digital Radio Network. The truth is out there, just waiting to be discovered.
And now, if you will, accompany me on a journey to the future.
For more information on the host of UFO Classified, Erica Lukes, upcoming guests, as well as links to the past shows,
visit her website at ufoclassified.com.
UFO Classified.
UFO Classified.
This is KCOR Las Vegas, home of the Digital Radio Network, broadcasting from a shack just south of